Hello viewers, welcome back to our YouTube channel, and today we want to kickstart our new chapter, that is chapter 6. In the previous video we concluded the chapter 5 and we looked at Lorentz curve. That was the topic that concluded our chapter 5, and today I want us to look at chapter 6. And this chapter 6 is all about measure of central tendency. Measure of central tendency. Measure of central tendency. Measure of central tendency, or what you call measure of location. We want to understand what this basically means, and of course, as per the study objective, by the end of this chapter you should be able to calculate the measures of central tendency such as mean, median, mode, and as well as using those different techniques and formulas to be able to interpret the results. Then the other thing, you should also be able to calculate the measure of location in terms of the weighted average mean, or the weighted mean, the geometric mean, the harmonic mean, and of course you'll be able to determine the median and the mode using the graphical method. And of course you should also be able to know the advantages and disadvantages of the measures of location. So, measure of dispersion, measure of central tendency. The measure of central tendency looks at the methods. Measures of central tendency. These are methods. These are methods. These are methods of values. These are methods of values used. These are methods of values used to describe the middle, or central, characteristic of a set of data. To measure, to describe the middle or central characteristics. Central characteristic of a set of data, that best represents all the numbers, in the sample or population. That best represents all the numbers in the sample or population. So these are methods or values used to describe the middle or the central characteristic of a set of data that best represents all the numbers in the sample or population. So, of course, they show the average position of a given distribution of data. So, the measures of location or measures of central tendency, they show the average position of a given distribution of data. And of course, they are the values that lie between two extreme observations in the distribution that are used to summarize data by trying to find one number. So you try to summarize the observations or the different values of the distribution, and you try to find out only one number. So you get one number that is going to show you the average that is going to be lying between the two extreme observations in the distribution that are used to describe or summarize data by just giving you a random one value. And of course, in general, they are the ones that we refer to as the averages. We refer to them as averages. That's what we refer to them. They are averages. And of course, in statistics, an average is defined as the number that measures the central tendency of a given set of numbers. So that's the average. The average is just a number that measures the central tendency of a given set of numbers. So sometimes may be used to describe the central value or the center of the set of the data, and the most common value in a set of data is what we call the mode, and a typical middle value is a median, and then the average is seen as the arithmetic mean. So these measures provide important information which allows calculations that give a relationship of the middle value in the distribution. So they help us to get the information that will allow calculations that give a relationship of the middle value in the distribution. And of course, there are other measures of average which we shall talk about as far as this topic is concerned, like the weighted average or the weighted mean, the harmonic mean, and then the geometric mean. So the main objective of the measure of central tendency is, of course, to condense data into a single value and to facilitate comparisons between data. So you get a single value, and this single value is going to help you compare data set of different distributions. And of course, the measure of central tendency is very useful for describing the distribution in a very concise manner. So you get a value that is going to help you understand how the distribution is, how the data is going to be distributed. And of course, as I told you, that we can use it as a comparative study of the different, we can use it for a comparative study of the different distributions. And of course, we can also use it to do computations of various statistical measures, like we look at the measures of dispersion, measures of skewness, the skewness, and then the kurtosis. We shall look at some of those topics once we are done with this, but we shall also be able to see that we use some of these measures of central tendency, like the mean, the median, and then the mode, to determine whether the distribution is skewed or is not skewed. To look at the normal, whether the distribution is a normal distribution or it's not a normally distributed set of data. So, as we have said that the measures of central tendency, they are just the measures of average. They look at the averages. And why are we saying so? Because we know that data tend to congregate around a certain value that is normally called the central point. For example, if you look at maybe the number of students who are taking CPA, you can see that there's some kind of pattern in terms of what they do. They can, maybe you can assume, we can have an assumption that maybe these people, when they are done with their lectures, they always maybe try to gather around maybe the cafeteria and other places where they can hang out. So that could be a central point where the different people or the different data set can rotate around. So a measure of central tendency is just a value that represents the central entry of the data set. So we don't want to make this data to be so much into the theoretical aspects. Maybe we can just look at the properties of measures of central tendency. How can we tell that this measure of central tendency is actually good? How can we tell that this is a good measure of central tendency, or it's a measure that we can use to determine the central value? So you can look at the properties, or what we call the prerequisites, the properties of measures of central tendency, properties of a good measure of central measures of central tendency. How can we tell that a certain measure of central tendency? We have said the measure of central tendency, we have the mean, mode, median, and then we look at these other ones as the weighted mean, harmonic mean, and then the geometric mean. Of course, the first one is, these I'm just going to highlight because they are self-explanatory. It should be clearly defined. Should be clearly defined. So a good measure of central tendency should be clearly defined. We know what it is and what it portrays. Then the other is should be based on all observations, and of course this is where you will get the advantages and then the disadvantages of each of the methods. You'll find that some measure of central tendency are not going to use all the data set. So if they are not using the entire data set or the entire observations that we have been given in the question, you'll find that it's not a suitable measure, because we are saying that a good measure of central tendency should be able to use or should be computed based on all the observations, all the individual observations available, whether in a sample or in a population. The other is it should be easy to calculate. Of course, we shall see that some of these things are actually easy to compute, like the mean, the median, the mode. They are very easy to be computed. Then the other is that they shouldn't be affected by extreme values, or what we call outliers. Should not be affected by outliers, or what we call extreme values. These values which are too small or too big. So you'll find that some of these measures of central tendency, like the mean, is going to be affected by the outliers. Why? Because if you have a very big number and you want to get the average, you'll find that the average value you have gotten, you have computed, does not represent the entire data set, or does not represent all the data that are given in the data set. You'll find that it will be a value that will be too far away from the middle point because of the outliers, even though it is one of the measures of central tendency that utilizes all the data set. The other is that it should not be influenced by sampling fluctuations. Should not be influenced by sampling fluctuations. If there are some changes in the samples that we have collected, it shouldn't deviate so much, or it shouldn't be affected. The changes in the sample should not affect that measure or that central value. Then the other thing is that it should be able to be used for further arithmetic or algebraic treatments. It should be utilized for further mathematical treatments. So like for instance, I've told you that we shall see that when we go to measure of dispersion, we will find ourselves that we are going to use some of these measure of central tendency to be able to tell how the data is going to be spread away from certain values. So it should be capable of further mathematical treatments, or should be able to be used for further mathematical treatments or algebraic treatments. So those are some of the things. Maybe the other you can add on. It should be easy to understand or simple to understand. When I talk about mean, even the person who never went to school can actually know that we are talking about the average. And the moment you talk about the average, it's just looking at all the observations summed up together, then you divide by their numbers. So it should be easily understood by all people. So those are some of the properties, or what we call the prerequisites of a good, or the requisites of a good measure of central tendency. And of course, we will say that the common measure of central tendency or measure of location, we said we have what we call the arithmetic mean, we have the median, mode, weighted average, then geometric mean, and finally the harmonic mean. So those are some of the measures of central tendencies that we have, and those are the ones that we are going to put emphasis on as we are looking at the measure of central tendency. So we said we are going to look at what we call the arithmetic mean, or you can just call it mean. Then we are going to be looking at the median. We look at number 3, we look at the mode. We look at the number 4, we look at the weighted mean. Number 5, we look at the geometric mean. And finally, number 6, we shall look at what we call the harmonic mean. So we are going to look at each of these items independently. We are going to discuss each of them independently. So once we are done with all of this, then we will be done with the measures of central tendency. But before we complete those ones, just know we need to understand each of those items with their advantages and then the disadvantages. You have to understand the advantages of using mean, the advantages of using median, the advantages of using a mode, and then all these other aspects, because we shall need them as we are doing the different aspects to do with the measure of dispersion. Because with the measure of dispersion, we always look at the data and we try to see how the data is spread away from the middle point or from the average value. So here we are trying to compute that single value. But the moment we go to the measure of dispersion, we shall be looking at how are the different individual observations going to be spread away from the central point. So if you don't understand how we compute the central point, then it is going to be a little bit hard for you to grasp the other aspect. Even though they are going to be just computations, we are going to use different formulas. We are going to apply different techniques to be able to compute the measure of central tendency and then the measure of dispersion. But as I told you, these topics, from the measure of central tendency to measure of dispersion to skewness, kurtosis, these, all of them are going to be taking us to one point. We are going to be talking about the things that we are going to be discussing from the start of this chapter 6. So the big question would be in regards to selection of the measure of central tendency. Someone is going to ask you, how can I select which measure of central tendency to use? Remember, we said their advantages or their properties of a good measure of central tendency. But the big question is going to be, you look at the advantages of a given measure vis-a-vis the disadvantages of the other measure. If I look at the mode, the mean, the median, how can someone be able to choose that I'm going to use mean over the mode? How can someone tell? Of course, you keep in mind with the fact that some of these measures of central tendency are not going to have the properties that we talked about. But that won't be enough to be able to tell exactly which of these different measures of central tendency can someone use to make sure that they apply it and they will not have, they will make a well-informed decision based on the method that they have picked. So I'm going to give you on the selection of a measure of central tendency. And by the end of this chapter, you should understand which measure is going to be the best. Of course, the most preferred measure of central tendency are the arithmetic mean, the mode, and then the median. Those are the three best preferred measures of central tendency. The measures that or the methods that we can use to get our central value. Of course, all these three measures of central tendency are designed for the same work, and that is to give an indication of the central value of the distribution. All of these three, they want the bottom line is to be able to get the central value of the distribution, and each is obtained using a different method. So because we are using different methods, we may end up having different answers, but the bottom line is that all these three are used for us to be able to get the central value, or that single value that is in the center of the distribution. So the most important question to consider when deciding which of these three to use, you must use one that is most representative of the data in the distribution. In other words, if I get my mode, let's say my mode is 20 and my mean is, let's say, 25 and my median is 22. The question that you are going to ask yourself is that among these three, which of these represent the data set? So you look at the individual data set and you see what, or you look at how the data is spread. You may find that maybe in the data set we have 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Those are the different data set. Of course, you will see that within those, you are going to find that maybe this data set is going to be relevant, because you may find data set that is going to be maybe 21, 22, 21, 22, 21, 19, 10, like that. So you give the data, you pick out the measure of central tendency that is going to give you the most representation of the data set in the distribution. And how are you going to know? Of course, you look at these key factors. These are very important. You look at the type of the variable, the type of the variables that you have. Either you have discrete or you have a continuous distribution. So you look at the type of the variable, type of the variable, type of the variable. And in this, we talk about the discrete, or continuous distribution. Then the other thing you also look at the shape of the distribution, the shape of the distribution. Shape of the distribution, of course, you are going to look at on two things: the skewness, whether the data is skewed or it is symmetric. We are going to understand some of these terminologies. Symmetric, either the data is going to be skewed positively or negatively. If at all the data is skewed, then you look at whether you have a single mode. Are you having a single mode, or you have two mode, which is a bimode? Bimode, or what you call the multi-mode, because it could be more that you could have more than two modes, and you find you have a multi-mode. Then the other thing that you need to look at is, of course, you have to look at the advantages and then the disadvantages of each of the methodologies. Advantages and disadvantages. But those are some of the things that you can look at that can tell you which method to use, depending on the type of the data or the type of the variables that you have, the shape of the distribution that you have, depending on the mode that you have. Of course, the advantages and then the disadvantages of, let's look at the advantages and then the disadvantages of each of these three. And then once we are done with the advantages and the disadvantages, we can now go ahead to do the computations. I'm focusing on these theoretical aspects because I know you need them as much as you need the computations, because once you have understood what we are talking about, it will be very easy for you to grasp the concept, to get the computations right. Of course, I told you that even the theoretical aspects are examinable. It would be very hard for you to fail, even if it is just a 1 mark or 2 marks for the theoretical aspects. It will be really bad for you to fail, because within the computations you can make so much of the arithmetic errors and you end up not scoring the marks you would have scored. So it is always advisable to maximize the theoretical aspects, especially for computational papers, whereby you know that for computations it is really very easy for you to add up or subtract some values or multiply some values wrongly, and then you get off track, not because you don't know, but you have just made some mistakes or some errors have happened when you are computing. So it is always good to maximize points on the theoretical aspects. So I'm just going to give like 2 or 3 advantages and then maybe 1 or 2 disadvantages, then we'll move on. Let's start with the mean. Of course, the advantages of the mean is that it is easy to understand. Easy to understand. Mean is very easy to understand. The other point is that it takes into account all the data values. It takes into account all data values. Like when you are computing the mean, you use all the data set that has been given to you. This one is going to be least affected. It is going to be least affected by sampling errors. So least likely to be affected by the sampling errors. Sampling errors. These are advantages. Yeah, we are looking at the advantages of mean. They are easy to understand. They take into account all the values. It's also very easy to compute. They are straightforward to calculate. We have said they are easy to calculate. Easy to calculate because they are straightforward. Then it can also be used for further algebraic calculations. Can be used for further algebraic calculations. Then the other advantage is that it is stable. It doesn't fluctuate, or it does not change based on the number of samples that you have used. It is stable, usually does not differ from sample to sample. So you can see that some of these points we have actually gotten them from the properties. So we have said the last one, it is stable, hence does not differ from sample to sample, sample to sample. So let's look at the disadvantages. Disadvantages of mean. One of the disadvantages, I told you, it is affected by outliers, badly affected by extreme values, badly affected by extreme values, or what you call the outliers. Then the second one is that it rarely corresponds to an actual value in the data set. Rarely, it's very rare for the mean to actually correspond to any value or any actual value in the data set. Rarely correspond to an actual value, rarely correspond to an actual value in the data. So you'll find that it is going to be, you'll compute the mean value and it will not be similar to the actual values that were given to you in the question. So that's why we are saying, and the point that we looked at earlier was that a good measure should be a representative. It should be the representation of the distribution under study. Because you know, when you are computing these values, when you are computing the mean, you add up all values and then you divide, you count how many are they, maybe there are 20 numbers, then you sum up all the numbers and then you divide by their number. So you find that these values are not going to correspond to the values that we have in the data set. Then the other thing is that it's not a good measure in case of ratios. It's not a good measure in case of ratios. Of course, if you are dealing with ratios, you are doing, maybe you are doing ratio analysis, you can't use mean as a method of interpreting the data. Then lastly, sometimes it gives absurd answers. Sometimes it may give absurd answers. It may give absurd answers. So those are some of the advantages and then the disadvantages of the mean as a method or as one of the methodology of getting the central point or central value. Then let's look at the median. Median as a measure of central tendency or measure of location. The first advantage, it is also easy to calculate. It's very easy to calculate. It's easy to calculate the mean. Then the median. Then the other advantage is that it's not affected by extreme values. Not affected by extreme values, or what we call outliers. You will see that when we are looking at the mean, we don't add or subtract or multiply or divide anything. We just arrange the data. We shall see how we get the mean for both grouped data and ungrouped data. Then the other is that can be calculated. It can be calculated. Can be calculated when not all values are known. That even when we have some missing variables or some missing observations or individual values, you can easily get the median. So this means that it doesn't necessarily consider all the values. It may not consider all the values in the distribution. So we shall be seeing how we can be able to compute the median. Then let's look at the disadvantages. I told you I'm giving very few disadvantages of median, because I'm very sure even in the question it is very hard for you to find the advantages and disadvantages carrying more than 4 marks. It will be very hard. The first disadvantage, it is not well defined. It is not well defined, because you'll find that you may have data set that is almost, maybe they are all 10 observations, but you find the mean, the median, in terms of how you determine it, may differ. So if I have 9 observations and I have 10 observations, the way you determine them may be different. So it is not well defined. Then it is not based on all the observations of the distribution. It is not based on all values of a distribution. So you are seeing that some of these points we get them from the properties, because we say the first property was that it should be based on entire data set. Then the other disadvantage is that it is not suitable or capable. It's not capable for further mathematical treatment, for further algebraic treatment or mathematical treatments. It's not suitable for further algebraic treatment. Then of course, lastly, we can talk about the fact that sometimes the data set may have more than one median. Sometimes the data may have more than one median. So if you are making a decision and you have two numbers which are different, it may not necessarily be good for you. So that could be a disadvantage for the median, that sometimes some data set may have more than one median, and it becomes hard for you to do the comparison, especially if you are comparing the data set that has one median and then the data set that has two median. So let's look at the mode. Let's look at the mode. We give like 2 or 3 and we mode. So the advantages. The first advantage, it's also not affected by outliers or extreme values. Not affected by extreme values, or what you call the outliers. Not affected by outliers. Then the other thing, in most cases it is an important value of the distribution. It is in most cases an important value of the distribution or of the variable. Of course, when you look at the mode, you'll find that is the number that appears very many times. For instance, if I'm analyzing maybe age of students, and I find that most of the students are aged 21, so you'll find that 21 will be a very important variable in that distribution, because it will be a bottom line or it will be a benchmarking number for me to make a decision about the age of the students. So that's why we are saying that in most cases it is an important number. So let's look at maybe the disadvantages. The disadvantages of mode. The disadvantages of mode: it is not a representative of the entire values. So it is less representative. It is less representative because it does not depend on all values. The other, it is affected by sampling fluctuations or sampling errors. It is affected by sampling errors, or what you call fluctuations. And of course, lastly, it is not capable of being used for further mathematical treatment. It is not capable of further arithmetic treatment or mathematical treatment. It is not capable of further arithmetic or algebraic treatments. So that's all that I wanted to talk about as far as the introduction to chapter 6 is concerned. And what we are going to look at next will be the fact that we are going to pick out each of those different measures of central tendency, and then we explain each and every item in detail. We look at the mean, we look at the mode, we look at the median, we look at the weighted mean, we look at the geometric mean, and then the harmonic mean. We explain each of them using different methods that we know or that are available to us. So let me see you in the next video as we are looking at the different items, as we're picking out each of those items, and we are going to use each video to illustrate those aspects. But of course, if you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe to the channel so that we can be able to spread we can get noticed by very many people. The more you share, comment, and then you like our videos, they will help us to get more people to view our content. And you also let us know where you have not understood, where you need more clarity. You can let us know in the comment section so that we can be able to illustrate and then be able to give you more details as that will make you understand the concept. So these theoretical aspects are very important for you to understand the computations, because they are the ones that are going to help you to analyze the figures that you have calculated. Then the other last part that I want to talk about is the fact that if you are interested in joining our classes, we have a full year access that will give you access to all video lectures, recorded video lectures, class lectures for all our CPA course units, both the class lectures and then the revision classes at a cost of just 200,000. You get a full year access, and this full year access is going to enable you to have access to all the CPA classes at a cost of 200,000. So you only pay 200,000 and then you get access to all lectures for all levels. So, and above this is that you are going to be able to get classes that are free from ads. You are not going to have any ads that are going to pop up when you are watching these videos. They are free from ads. Then the other thing is that if you get interested, you can also be able to join our society, where we have a savings and investment society, where we have very many members so far that have come up, and we discuss so many things in regards to saving and then investing the money. And of course, you'll be able to earn interest based on how you have saved with the society. So if on that same amount, if you are interested in joining the other society, we also remove the membership fee, and it's going to be paid to the other society account where you'll be a member and you'll be added to the active members if at all you're interested. But if you are basically looking out for study lectures, I know the December sitting is coming. They have not yet finished the August sitting. Of course, August sitting is still on. You can also come and access the revision sessions, and then you'll be able to do your exams. So it's all about being interested in maybe having lectures, or you want as well to be interested in studying, but at the same time you want to be part of the society. So if you are interested, just let me know through our WhatsApp number. It is +256 792 915 722. That's our company WhatsApp number. So it is a 0792 915 722. Be specific when you're sending a text. Be specific on what you want, and then we will give you a way forward. So thank you for watching. Let's meet in the next video as we are starting off with our different measures of central tendency.